Velvet Underground frontman Lou Reed has died at the age of 71. He died of a liver-related ailment at his home in Long Island, New York on Sunday morning.
Well, he's viewed by many as the godfather of punk. Reed forged a new cultural universe with the Velvet Underground, the band he formed in New York in 1965. Reed was also an icon for fusing art and music, notably for his collaboration with Andy Warhol, who was also the group's manager.
While the Velvet Underground never achieved great commercial success, the band has influenced generations of musicians, including R.E.M. and Nirvana. The band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996.
Well, post-Velvet, Reed released 20 studio albums as a solo artist, his main commercial success being Walk on the Wild Side, his only top 20 hit single. An admitted hard drinker and drug user for many years, Reed had a liver transplant this May after suffering liver failure.
He is survived by his second wife, musician and performing artist Laurie Anderson.
There's only one great occupation that can change the world. That's real rock and roll. I believe to the bottom of my heart, the last cell, that rock and roll can change everything.
Tributes have started pouring in from all over the music world. Iggy Pop called the news devastating.
While The Who urged Reed to take a walk on the peaceful side this time, even Miley Cyrus expressed her shock at the death of the American icon.
And joining us in studio now is Ching-Wei Chen, director of the Velvet program at music recognition company Grace Note. And thank you very much, Ching-Wei, for joining us. You know, we talk about the passing of one of rock's music most important figures, and our producer Angie wants to know, what's a tech geek like yourself? What's the connection between a tech geek like yourself and rock and roll? What's that got to do with, what are the similarities, the connection?
Yeah, I'm a proud tech geek. But more than tech geek, I'm also a music tech geek. And I work at a company that runs the world's largest music database. So I get to work with music on a daily basis in both my personal and professional life.
All right, Lou Reed, as we were talking about just before we went on air, is not a familiar name to many of us. I didn't know him until news of him dying last night. So why is he such a music icon to music lovers?
Yeah, you know, his first band, the Velvet Underground, I mean, they were not very commercially successful at first, and I mean, that band and his subsequent solo work have not produced, very much commercial kind of hits. But there's sort of a famous legend about the Velvet Underground's first album, that it only sold a few tens of thousands of copies, but every single person who bought that album went on to start a band. So it was something about the style of music they did that really pushed people and made them believe that they could, start their own bands. And his music has really reached, all different edges of the rock genre.
So he has a lot of influence as well. Even David Bowie saying that, he is my master here. What about Asia? How can we actually say, because they say that Lou Reed has an influence across the world. What about his influence here in Asia then?
Yeah, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find any rock band that doesn't directly or indirectly have a link to Lou Reed or the Velvet Underground through influencers. I mean, like you mentioned already, R.E.M. and Nirvana were influenced by him. U2, loves him and has done a cover of his music. And so, only 2 or 3 steps removed from Lou Reed, you'll find pretty much any musician on earth. There's a piece of musical trivia about Asia. Lou Reed did a lot of collaborations with David Bowie in the 70s. And David Bowie, you might know, did a song called Under Pressure with the band Queen. And as it turns out, and here's the link, Queen was the first band that the K-pop star Psy actually watched, and he credits that as being the beginning of his love affair with music. So, pretty interesting.
So that's a 2 degree of separation as opposed to the 6 degrees of separation.
There is always a connection somewhere there. He also writes songs, right? What are his songs about? I'm not going to pretend to be cool because I really don't
You
know.
really don't know, Tim. I need to educate you a little bit.
Songs that he writes.
Well, he's like a New Yorker, like local native, and so he writes a lot about the kind of underside, underbelly, the less heard stories of people on the margins of society. Like you mentioned before, he was a heavy drinker and a kind of drug user. So some of that side of the world, he pushed some of kind of sexual taboos as well. Walk on the Wild Side, the song about transvestite. So his lyrics were very important to his music. He had a very unconventional vocal style, you could call it. It wasn't so much singing as talking or reciting.
So he said he had a deadpan voice, a
very
deadpan
low,
approach
deadpan.
to his music, right, to his lyrics. So he also had like you said, very controversial upbringing as well, that perhaps some would say prompted him to write about all these issues here growing up.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'll leave that for further research.
Okay, but then also, saying that, then you also have, you're a big fan, and I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag. Let you tell us a little bit about what happened in your personal life.
Yeah, I've been a fan. I've loved his music and the Velvet Underground since I was a teenager. But his music will always have an extra special place in my heart and in my life because my wife and I chose his song "I Found a Reason" as the song that we danced to as our first dance at our wedding.
Oh.
So, yeah, I'm definitely very sad to see him go, but I think his music will live on for a long time.
And has a lot of influence as well to the next generation of musicians as well.
I
Thank
hope
you
so.
very much, Ching-Wei, for coming in and speaking to us. Ching-Wei Chen, Director of Developer Program at music recognition company Grace Note.
Still ahead on